Welcome one and all to my report from Erit Bellum 1, the Kings of War singles tournament at Franticon 2019. And hello there. So I have my lists in hand, and one notable thing about this tournament is that there are two lists involved, 1,500 points and 2,000 points, so I'll go through both of those shortly. But before we do that, let's just have a look at this image from game number 1, so you've got something beautiful to look at. It's a very nice mat there. I think my army looks quite tasty on there. So, my lists, my 2,000 point list is quite familiar to anyone that's been watching any of my recent League of Rhordia action. There's not too much that's different in there. It's got the spearling formation with the Master Sergeant, a horde of archers, Honour Guard, Soul Reaver cavalry as allies, an Iron Beast, some volley guns, 2 volley guns though, because I'm trying out some different things as well. One notable thing that is new is the Halfling Sorcerer with the Blizzard spell. So I wanted to give him a try, so he's in both lists to see how that old Blizzard works out. And another thing I wanted to try out here is the Duke, which I always have on a winged arrowles. I've given him ranged attacks in this tournament. So in the smaller list, at 1,500 points, he's got the Holy Hand Grenade, and at the 2,000 point list, he's got the Diadem of Dragonkind. Now, in the smaller list, which the first 2 games will be featuring, I think I may have gone overboard chopping out some of the hard-hitting units here, because I was concerned at several things as I was scaling down the 2,000 point list, because the deadline for the lists for this tournament was only a day after the previous tournament, so making changes to the list in the short space of time, I may have made a couple of mistakes. So what I did in the end, because of the issue of unlocks, I didn't take the Soul Reavers. I felt that having a very expensive allied unit that wouldn't allow me to unlock any Rhordia special units would be a mistake. So I took them out. We'll see whether that comes back to bite me, considering they're one of the hard-hitting units in there. The Iron Beast has come out because it's so expensive, and I didn't want to have too few units at this point level, so we'll see whether that is a mistake as well. And what else? Only 1 volley gun in here because it's a low point level game. The Wizard, or the Sorcerer should I say, is still in there, and the Standard Bearer with the Loot of Insatiable Darkness is in both lists. The Honour Guard have the Potion of the Caterpillar in both. In the smaller list, the Soul Reaver cavalry get downgraded into Halfling Knights, who are not too bad, but they're not particularly good either. The Halfling Archers have Fire Oil in both lists, and in the 2,000 point list, because there are some points left over, the Master Sergeant gets a horse, which he doesn't have in the lower point level, and in addition to that, the Spearling Horde get the Brew of Strength in the 2,000 point lists. They don't have it in this one here. So, game number 1. And considering I took out a lot of the hard-hitting ability from my list to get it down to 1,500 points, what do I not want to come up against? A gigantic wall of unavoidable defense 6 would probably be high on that list, and the person I was supposed to be playing in the first round, I'm assuming didn't have such a list. However, that person didn't turn up at the tournament, so who I ended up playing, well, look at that. That is 3 hordes of obsidian golems who are defense 6. There is also Infernock, who is a big gigantic defense 6 monster next to them, which you think, okay, well, let's work with this. It's a wall of defense 6, but they're not very fast. They can be surged, but you can still get around them, and maybe you can outmaneuver them, and you've got superior numbers of units that can possibly do some damage, so get into some flanks maybe, set things up. However, it's the dominate scenario. So, I'm going to have to actually engage with them all at some point in the middle of the table, and I don't want to be putting too many of my units out on the flanks, getting them stuck there unable to score. In addition, you'll also see there's a nice big juicy forest right in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the table there, and it's only got 1 tree in it, but that's because the others have been moved. You can actually see them there on the left lying down. They've not been put back yet, but that is a forest right in the middle of the dominate area, which means that my shooting ability is going to be seriously mitigated into those golems, They're also backed up by a lot of healing as well, and one of them even has the healing brew. So this is going to be very difficult. Let's have a look at the deployment. So I've got my Duke down there behind the archers, so he's going to fly up on the left and just threaten the flank and use his newfound ranged abilities to try and do some damage there. In the middle, the Honour Guard just behind the Spearlings, because even though I do have a slight speed edge, there is quite a bit of surge on the other side, so I don't want to risk a surge sending them straight into my Honour Guard. That wouldn't be fun times at all. Same story for the Soul Reavers. I've got them behind a regiment of Spearlings, and the other flank is just a regiment that are going to be wandering off around the side and maybe looking for a sneaky flank, because they're so unthreatening that maybe they'll be ignored and they can actually get in there on the flank. I was thinking, could I possibly put the Soul Reavers out on the flank and then get in that way, which would prevent them possibly from going through the woods or the hedge. However, I think that would definitely be seen as a huge threat, and they would definitely be countered. They are one of my 2 units, though, that could potentially kill one of those golem hordes. I'm not confident in the volley gun's ability to do anything in this game, because, of course, those woods are going to make it very difficult to even hit, and then they've got healing behind that will heal up the few wounds that I may actually do with it. So, my opponent, quite happy to pose with his army there. One of the hordes of obsidian golems is represented by a giant golden bull. Behind there are a couple of characters with surge, and there are a couple of fire teams, which are breath attacks, and some throwing mastiff packs, or mastiff hunting packs, whatever they're called. So, not a lot of units, and I'm thinking at this stage maybe I should have gone for a slightly more elite list. This scenario definitely is not what I would like against a list like that. So, I go first. I believe my opponent allows me to go first, which I would probably rather not do, because I'm not going to be able to do much shooting in turn 1. So I'm really going to stay kind of at arm's length and try and chip away with a bit of shooting, see if that goes well, and if it does, then move in for the kill. If it comes down to just a grind fest against those golems with heal, though, I'm not going to win. So the ideal situation, I could perform like a lightning strike in the last couple of turns and just take out a couple of units, and then win just through sheer weight of numbers, if that's possible. But that would require me not losing any units to shooting as well. So you can see my Duke has moved up onto the hill there. And everything else just approaching not too fast. I want to put those Spearlings in the front, so if he wants to charge out and fight them, that's great. Turn 1 for the enemy, and a bit of an advance coming up. And not much, so there you go. Turn 2, and I've pushed up a little bit further again, still looking for shooting, and this is definitely a bit of a standoff at this stage, because my opponent, as you can see here, doesn't want to come through the other side of the woods, because that means all my units would be able to charge in unhindered, which would be the only way they've got a good chance. Only the Honour Guard really will not worry at all about going into the woods because of the Caterpillar Potion. There's no Iron Beast, of course, in this list. And my Halfling Knights over on the right, I may have referred to them as Soul Reavers earlier, actually. So, ignore that, they are only Halfling Knights in this small list. So, the Duke works his way forward there just to get within 12 so he can lob his grenade at Infernock, which is going to put him in range of potentially being surged into, but he's taking the risk. Turn 2. So, well, it's continuing to be a bit of a standoff. The golems aren't going to advance beyond that point too far. There's no reason for them to do that because I can't really threaten them at the moment. And there's the Duke. Infernock's moving towards him, and then a fire team is down there as well, just hiding behind the hedge, flaming out. And over here, the regiment of Spearlings, they've actually got those golems, that golem horde there, to turn to look at them, so that's pretty good. If I can get them slightly distracted, maybe I can outnumber in the middle. They're not overly concerned though, because they do have that surge ability, so they can always just turn back and come in that way. My horde have taken a bit of damage from shooting, so Infernock does get successfully surged into my Duke, but he's not going to do that much damage. Turn 3, so the Duke just decides to go back in there rather than hide, and everything else is pushing forwards, so I'm taking a little bit of damage from shooting, but not a huge amount. The Halfling Knights, not Soul Reavers, are staying back a little bit. They are nimble, so they're not as likely to get stuck. And the Honour Guard staying behind the Spearlings where it's safe. So the standoff continues, and any damage that I'm doing a few points of damage a turn with the volley gun and the Master Sergeant chipping away just little bits here and there, but they're just being healed back very easily. And you can see how the line is not moving forward particularly, just this staring contest going on at the moment. I think the enemy has a slight advantage in terms of number of hordes, so for unit strength purposes that could be important at the end, especially since they're very difficult to kill compared to mine. And look at this horde take a ton of damage. Now I'm assuming that I just forgot to invoke the stealthy rule in this turn. Considering the amount of damage they took, I probably just forgot to point that out to my opponent. So they've taken a lot of damage there. And the golems decide they're not going to face that way, they're going to turn back into the main battle line now. So I've got choices now. Do I charge in yet, or do I continue to stand off? Oh, look at that human finger pointing there. The Duke takes more damage, but he's not going to die yet. And the standoff continues. I think the golems may have actually moved backwards in some cases. Turn 4, so the Spearlings have pushed right up into the woods, and the other ones have pushed right up to the hedge. And I've got myself, so lots of my units will be in charge range next turn now. So laying down the gauntlet because I'm going to lose this shooting battle. And a little bit of damage is being done in that combat. You can see I've actually moved my archers up there, so Infernoc can see their flank. Now, I'm quite happy for him to charge them and free up the Duke, because he could be a nuisance to all the other units, and he's got Crushing Strength, Thunderous Charge, so if I could get him to attack the golems, that would be great. So I would rather Infernoc charge my archers, who are basically useless at this stage. All they're doing is providing unit strength for the scenario, which isn't going to help if I can't kill any of the golems. So I'm trying to tempt him to perform a flank charge on the archers. We'll see if he falls for it though. Turn 4. Right, you can see that I've got my Spearling regiment on the right there, who are moving up behind that rock. And the enemy are still standing off. This fight's continuing though. And now it's turn 4 for the enemy. The Duke's not doing much to him at all. And instead of piling in, as I hoped, the golems, because they're so survivable, it's probably wise not to throw them in and take the first hit from my heavy hitting units. They're standing back and they're just going to say, we're going to survive this game, and we're going to plant this little injured hunting pack in front of us, so you can't do all the charges that you want, and if you do want to do any, then that hedge is going to hinder some of your units as well. So the Spearling horde take more damage from shooting, and they're dead. Wow, wow, wow. And the Duke goes down as well this turn, so he didn't take the bait. He did not charge the flank of the archers, which is annoying. Turn 5, so I decide, you know what, let's just throw everything in there. Doesn't matter if they're hindered, let's go for it. So the archers charge into the little hunting pack there. The Honour Guard go into the central unit of golems, and the Spearling regiment go into the golems on the right. And you can see how much the damage is being inflicted. I can't remember exactly how much all that represents. I think the coin that's a different colour is probably 5 or 10, and the other ones are 1. Not much is done there though. And the reason I've thrown the archers in is because it's going to prevent the Honour Guard from being flanked by anything. Because that hunting pack there, who are alive, if they died, the archers would have overrun as far as they could go and then stopped an inch away, which would have also, if they were lined up perfectly, then it should prevent the Honour Guard from being flanked as well. So that's why the archers have gone in, rather than standing there and shooting. So I've got my other Spearling unit there, ready to flank in a minute. Turn 5 for the Abyssal Dwarves. So there's counter-charging going on mostly, and that one unit of obsidian golems. The bull has been moved off the base because it was kind of overbalanced, I think. So that is not able to attack anyone at this stage, but all the other units are charging in. Infernoc's gone in there into the flank of the archers. Not much damage is dealt though, but they do heal all their wounds back pretty much as usual, and there's a tape measure in the shot there. If anyone's watching this live, let me know, by the way. Obviously with no advance warning, I don't expect people to be watching at this time of day. Not much damage done, and turn 6 for me, so it's a double charge onto the golems there with the 2 spearling regiments. The Honour Guard are going to try and kill off another unit, and, well, unsuccessfully. Not much damage is going to be done there at all, unfortunately. However, my wizard with Blizzard and the volley gun, they do successfully take out the one of the hunting packs there, and damage is done to Infernoc. And a bit of damage onto that flame breath attack weapon there, that fire team. Turn 6 for the Abyssal Dwarves, and at this point I've got nothing protecting the Honour Guard's flank. The fact that they've taken 2 turns and haven't really scratched the golems much means that they're getting smushed to death now. So of course they're going to die. Look at all that damage piled up on them. And a waver on those spearlings. And there is a turn 7, which isn't going to help me too much. The Halfling Knights finally get into the action. And because this Infernoc fella was in the woods, I positioned some individuals around so that when the Halfling Knights charged him, they would not actually enter the woods, because there's just enough of his base sticking out the edge so that I could do that. But that wasn't enough to kill him, because Halfling Knights aren't that great. And not much done to those golems either. The defense 6 is just very difficult to chew through for this list that I've put together that doesn't have enough hitting power. And it's not going to end well. More halflings are probably going to die. The Halfling Knights get smushed. A double charge there. And that's how it's going to look at the end. So in terms of the dominate score, I do actually have a unit that's fully within the zone. I don't think the other unit of spearlings are majority inside the zone though, and there are quite a lot of Abyssal Dwarf units, so that is a loss. Thoughts on what I could have done different? Well, the slightly more hard-hitting unit of my Halfling Knights could have been positioned on the flank, perhaps, which would have got them maybe more into the action. I could have just completely deployed on the flanks and ignored the fact this was dominate and just tried to outmaneuver and try and kill as much as possible and then think about the scenario later. But I have made the mistake in the past of placing too many units on the flanks in dominate and then finding that they get stuck there and can't get the unit strength required back into the centre at the end. But so far I'm thinking this list has not gone particularly well. I've cut out too many of the hard hitters from the big list rather than building one from the ground up for 1500 points. However, in the tournament pack you are required to take a certain amount of the list that's the same. I think it's 1000 points of the smaller list must go into the big list. So you can't build something completely and radically different. But let's go into game 2, and hopefully, since I suffered such a crushing loss and barely picked up any points, then I should be against something equally poorly thought out. And surely not another wall of defense 6 golems. What are the chances of that happening? The one thing that my army my small list is definitely not kitted out to deal with, and it's here again. Wouldn't you know it, it's another couple of hordes of obsidian golems and an Infernoc in the middle of them as well, a big blob of defense 6. And this list is a little bit different though. There are some abyssal half-breeds, which you can see over on the top left there. There are 2 regiments of those. And this scenario, I can't remember what this one's called, but there are several objectives in the centre of the table, and there is a base objective as well. What's this one called? Is it Occupy? It may well be, where you have 3 objectives in the middle, which are the secondary objectives, and a base objective each on the opponent's side of the table that you want to be claiming. So that's a little bit more favourable. There are more objectives to be fought over. I won't just be stuck battling defence 6 in the middle of the table in a piece of difficult terrain, so that's good. and it's not quite as defense 6 heavy. I've got more of an open battlefield in the middle there, which is where all the golems are, nicely enough. So, on this side I've got my knights behind my spearling horde, and I've got my volley gun and all my shooting pretty much I want on this side to go for those golems. There isn't as much healing in this list as in the previous one, so I'm happy about that. The Duke is just behind this house, so he can have his choice of which way to go. The Master Sergeant is down there as well, and I'm mainly just holding up the left flank because if you look, my base objective that the enemy are trying to reach is slightly to the left of my spearling horde, which is kind of in the middle there, and on my right flank. And they're quite far away, so if I can hold them up, I think I can deal with those two hordes and Infernock with everything else I've got. If I can use my Spearling Regiment, the Master Sergeant and the Duke to just hold up the left flank for long enough, I think I could do something in the middle against that lot. So let's see. On the enemy side there is also a half-breed champion of some description there with them, and in the middle you can see there is a little character or two behind. So there's a secondary objective. You can see, I don't know if you can see the objective I put down in enemy territory yet, but I think I put it somewhere on the left. So I'm not actually bothered about going for that. That was just there to try and force the spread deployment from my opponent, because I think my army is a bit more mobile than his. He's got those 3 units over on the left that are decently quick, but the golems are quite slow and ponderous, and he doesn't have any flyers, and I do have a flyer. So turn 1, and my opponent goes first. I'm not sure if I let him go first or if he chose to go first, but the half-breeds are moving up, getting into charge range, and the golems are working their way up. The one on the right was surged, of course, which is why they've gone so much further than the rest, and not much going on there, so turn 1 for me. So pushing up, and not pushing up too far because I've got the shooting superiority definitely in this game, and keeping my cavalry behind the other units, just plinking away bits of damage onto the golems there. Over on this side I've positioned my Duke so that he's out of charge arc of, or out of sight should I say, of the half-breeds, but he can see them because his base is smaller. So his centre can just see the corner of their base, they can't see him, which allows him to try and throw a holy hand grenade at them. So if he wants to charge into those spearlings, that's fine by me. There's a good chance he won't kill them in one go. And you can see how it's looking there. So I've put my spearling horde right in range for those golems to charge, quite happy for that to happen. The obsidian golems, they're super duper defensively sound, but they're not as amazing at actually killing things. So I think they only hit on 4s and they may be crushing strength 1. So that's not an optimal way of dealing with a horde of ensnaring spearlings. Maurice says hi from Quebec. Hello there. First comment on the live broadcast here. Turn 2 for the Abyssal Dwarf. So they do go for that charge, which I'm quite happy to accept because there's a chance they won't kill them. And even if they do, that unit's just there to hold them up anyway, and I'm going to try and dance around them with the Duke and see what happens there. Over here, these golems charge into the Spearling Regiment, I think. Or actually, they may have been surged all the way up there and just stopped an inch away. I think that's actually what happened. And over on the right, you can see that those golems who are really close to the Spearling Horde do charge them, which is, again, fine, because that's going to allow me to do a double charge on them now, because those Halfling Knights are nimble, so there'll be no question marks over whether they can fit. So, the Honour Guard, it's generally more tricky putting them behind your own lines, going for double charges, but I think I've left them enough space so it is going to be possible there in the middle. So that Spearling Regiment does get killed. They take 10 damage, which is quite a juicy amount, but I'm fairly confident in how that flank's going. So turn 2. Right then, so the Halfling Knights and the Spearling Horde charge into the golems and actually do a decent bit of damage on them. So I'm confident I will win this fight if it rumbles on. So I've got the Loot of Insatiable Darkness as well, which is bumping up some of my units. Then the Spearling Regiment and the Honour Guard go in here. Now, I was possibly too confident here. I was expecting the Honour Guard to do a lot better than this and kill the Defence 6 golems in one round. Now, I don't know whether that was that likely, but that is not a good amount of damage there. Because I don't think there's any wall or anything there. Let's go back and look. So no, there's not. There's nothing to hinder the Honour Guard. So with 24 attacks hitting on 3s, and then with Thunderous 2 crushing 1, you'd expect them, with the assistance of another unit as well, to probably do a teensy bit more than that. I was hoping to just kill them in one go, and then get the Honour Guard out of the way. The Duke, you can see, has been charged by this bad boy. Now, have I gone too far here? So, let's see. Okay, I think I took a picture of this, of the Duke, after he'd been charged in the following turn. I just took the pictures while the turn was starting, you see. So he did jump across and throw a grenade at someone after getting out of their charge arc. And you can see there that I've put some damage onto Infernock as well. There is one notable thing that's happened here that you can't actually see. So, on the... let's have a look here, let's see if I can get a picture of it. So that unit of half-breeds there, I had the opportunity to take them, not necessarily out the game, but out the game temporarily, because my wizard, I can push them back with Wind Blast, and as everything's set up here, you can see on the right of the picture, let's turn the camera off for a second, so that unit there is the Honour Guard, and they're going to be charging into the Obsidian Golems in front of them in a double charge. However, that's going to leave their flank exposed to this unit of half-breeds here when they go in. And what I could have done, very easily, well, for a start, I should have not been as confident in the Honour Guard's ability to destroy a Defence 6 horde of big monsters, because that was really my plan. I wasn't banking on them failing there. And I have Wind Blast, so I could push these half-breeds backwards with the wizard, with the sorcerer, which almost definitely would have taken them out of charge range, because the Honour Guard shift quite a bit to the right when they charge in here. However, I had Blizzard as the spell, and I thought, you know what, I should be using that Blizzard to try and give it a bit of a test to see how it does, and I really neglected that I even had the Wind Blast. So those half-breeds are going to charge the flank of the Honour Guard now, because of that foolish mistake. And you can see there, look at that. So I also could have just thrown the Master Sergeant into them to block them up, which would have worked because they're not nimble. So I had plenty of options. I just didn't think the Honour Guard were going to fail. I was too confident in their ability to murder those golems there. And when it didn't happen, that was left open. So you should always have a plan B, folks. So the Duke gets charged by the hero there. And these Honour Guard are going to get absolutely toasted. The Halfling Knights have been charged by the golems, but they might survive that. Turn... oh, not the end of the turn yet. So the Duke takes a bit of damage, but not enough to worry him. The Honour Guard are slaughtered, as expected. And that's how they set up afterwards. Halfling Knights take some damage, but not enough. And we're on to turn 3 for me. So I get a double charge in. So because you can see here, the Spearling Horde are going to have a flank on those golems, so they take that, and the knights in the front, that's enough to kill off the horde, and they turn back into the battle now, and the knights are quite safe at the back there. This unit of golems get flank charged by the Spearling Regiment, but not much damage done there at all. And then all my shooting, what does it accomplish? Just chipping away at Infernock. And the Duke charges into the unit of half-breeds that are sitting on the left-hand objective. So they're just sitting there, not getting involved in the game, so he thought, well, I might as well go down swinging. Charges into them, does a tiny bit of damage. So, it's not going completely wrong. Brendan has joined the chat there, hello. And it's still up in the air a little bit at this stage. The Honour Guard, it was a very avoidable death, so it should be going better, really. Turn 4. So, the Duke is going to get sandwiched and probably eaten there. And you can see that I've positioned the Sorcerer, throwing away his life, because I do not want those half-breeds to charge the flank of the archers. The Sorcerer may be more useful, more versatile than the archers, but the archers are the only unit around there that can contest the base objective on my half. So I need them to be alive. So I've put the Sorcerer there, knowing full well that they could overrun into the volley gun, but I've just accepted those units will die to preserve the archers, because of course they're a unit that can actually score, and I need the enemy not to take that objective. Infernock is going toe to toe with my Spearling Horde, and the golems countercharge the other Spearling regiment there, the one that's not dead yet. And there's two characters that will undoubtedly be wavering my Halfling Knights with their, I think it's fireballs they have. The Duke is dead, as expected, but he's tied them up a little bit. And look at this, so the half-breeds do kill the sorcerer, but they only overrun 1 inch, which isn't enough to take them into the volley gun. So there's a stroke of good luck, so the volley gun's going to have another turn to shoot. The Spearling regiment do become wavered though, and the horde is fine. So turn 4 for the halflings. So there's a charge from the horde into Infernock. You can see he's getting wounds back because he gets healed by the fireball abilities from the, I think they're iron casters, something along those lines. When they do damage with their fireballs, it heals Infernock, which is really annoying. So you can see he's actually healthier than he was earlier. My shooting battery, what does it do? Damage on golems, not going to help too much. And that's how it's looking at the moment. Turn 5 for the enemy. So the half-breeds charge into the volley gun, which is going to get eaten alive. And this guy charges into the flank of the Spearlings. And you may think, well, he's an individual, so why does it matter if he's in the flank? Well, it does matter for these because they have, of course, the Ensnare and Phalanx special rule, and you need to be in the front to be hindered by those things. So that's how it's looking there. So it looks like I'm going to start losing some more units. The Knights get finished off by more shooting attacks. The volley gun is corpsed up real bad, and the regiment of Spearlings are dead. The horde is still alive though. Turn 5 for me. So the archers they actually turn to face the abyssal half-breeds because I didn't want to get flanked by them, because I need these archers to live because they're next to that crucial base objective. And there is a way that this game can still not be a loss for me, even though I've only killed 1 unit. Because I'm actually well positioned on the objectives. This horde sitting on an objective, they're currently holding it. The enemy are holding that centre one there with the golems, and they're also holding the one all the way on the left with the half-breeds that have just sat out most of the game. So you can see there how it's looking. So, if my horde of Spearlings can survive and hold that objective, that's going to be 1. The enemy are currently sitting on 2, but that means if they want to stay on them, they can't send those obsidian golems into combat, and they have to survive whatever shooting I throw at them for the rest of the game. So we shall see. Turn 6. And this is what initially my opponent does until he changes his mind, and you can definitely see why, because he double charges into my archer horde. However, if he were to have done that and not killed the archers, who are inspired and totally undamaged with those units crashing in through difficult terrain, if they survived that, then the game would most likely end in a draw, because he's abandoned the middle secondary objective, and I'm holding 1, which you can see on the right there, right below my head, and he's holding 1 with the half-breeds that aren't getting pictured because they're all the way on the other side of the battlefield. And he would not hold my base objective because I've got 2 hordes next to it, and even if my horde of Spearlings end up not being within range, I would still have the archers there to contest it. So this would have been quite a big mistake, I think. It would have been a gamble. It's kind of a go big or go home moment, and in the end he changed his mind about that and decides not to do it after I've taken the pictures, and there you go. It makes much more logical sense to keep a unit on an objective and almost guarantee a win. It would have been crazy, and we had a good laugh about that possibility. And the archer's probably going to live now. They're much more likely to survive just the charge of the half-breeds. But that's not going to help because I need to kill a unit that's on an objective to get a draw. So my standard bearer manages to get wavered from shooting attacks. And look at that, he double ones my Spearling horde. So that could actually be crucial. If I can kill one unit now, I could draw the game. So the archers survive, as expected. So turn 6 for me. Now the Master Sergeant, he thinks, what am I more likely to kill? Those half-breeds all the way over there, or the Obsidian Golems, who are, I believe, in inspiring range and defense 6. And he decides he's going to pop out from behind the house, take 4 shots at the half-breeds, and just hope for a lucky nerve roll to kill them because they're not inspired. And he actually does 3 damage, which is pretty good. But unfortunately, he cannot remove them. So it would have taken a huge slice of luck, but I think it was the only possible play that could have resulted in a decent end result for me. You can see that my Horde do not kill Infernock. Unfortunately, they can't have their crushing strength boosted with Bane Chance because their standard bearer is wavered, and the archers can't do much to those half-breeds either. So that's how the game's going to end. I'm going to have that objective there, which is worth 1. My opponent has the central one and the flank with the half-breeds. That's 2 to 1. And that's the end of that. So, even if the game isn't going your way, even if you think the list you're facing is like the kryptonite to what you've brought, even if you make mistakes early in the game and get your most powerful unit crushed needlessly, when there were 2 totally different things that you could have done to prevent them being killed that weren't that difficult to think of at all, even in those situations there are still ways that you can keep trying to weasel the scenario as the game goes on. And towards the end there, it was possible that I could have got out of that game with a draw, with a little bit of luck at the end. You just need a few things to go in your favour, which is always possible if you just keep rolling dice, keep making your opponent roll dice, and you never know, things can turn round at the end. A teensy bit of luck there, with those half-breeds being killed, would have resulted in a draw. So, going into the next game, and I'm much happier now because I've got my big juicy list out. The Halfling Knights are no more, never to be seen again in any of my army lists, I think, because they're not good enough. Replaced with the ultimate killer unit of Doom, the Soul Reavers, Defense 6, ultimate death machines, speed 8, 20 attacks, murder everything they touch. They are now in the list. The Iron Beast is also back in. The Duke has changed his ranged attack to the Diadem of Dragonkind, which is teensy bit more expensive. The Horde of Spearlings now have the Brew of Strength, which makes them much more potent. And were there any other changes in there? The Master Sergeant now has a horse, which is a decent upgrade for him because it gives him Thunderous Charge 1. So if I ever want to get him into combat, which is very possible, then that will help. So, after 2 crushing losses, picking up very few points, what can you expect to face in round 3? And the answer is Kingdoms of Men. That's where they usually seem to find themselves, lower in the table. Regardless who's playing them, Kingdoms of Men seem to be one of the armies that typically don't do that well at tournaments. And that giant McDonald's drink there is not one of the enemy units, it's not some kind of proxy for a giant. So this scenario is, now I can't even remember the name of this one either, but there are objectives of varying value. So the green ones are worth 2 points, the blue ones are worth 1 point, and the red one is worth 3 points. So you can see there's a green one, and I actually stacked the objectives slightly. When I was placing my half of the objectives, I was putting them more on one side of the table, gambling that I would just get that half in the roll-off, and if I didn't, then I think my army is more suited to marching forwards to engage the enemy than my opponent's army. Because I've got a flyer for a start, I've got harder hitting units. So I would like to actually get into combat because they do somewhat outgun me, this Kingdoms of Men army, and I'll go through it in a moment to tell you why. So I've got my Sorcerer and the Duke over on this flank because you can see they're opposite a cannon and some shooty units there. So I want to blizzard and charge into them and get behind enemy lines. Spearling Regiment are just sitting on that 2-point objective. They want to stay there the whole game behind a hill. They don't care about moving at all. In the middle, the Iron Beast is going to be wandering up behind my Spearling Horde, and the archers will be quite happy to sit in cover. They are going to have to move forwards to get the full benefit of cover though, because they're not currently 50% covered. The volley gun, one of the volley guns, there's an extra one now, and the Master Sergeant is down there as well. Over on this flank, this is the ultimate flank of doom, so I've got a volley gun to discourage the enemy from coming forward. I've got a regiment of spearlings to soak up the initial charge from one of the 3 units of knights he's got up there, and then both my heavy hitting units of doom are just behind, ready to unleash a furious counter-charge. If I'm going to have one of these units get charged, one of the knight units, then I would prefer it to be the Soul Reavers, with them being defense 6, so they can absorb more of a punch than the Honour Guard can. So the enemy, there are 3 units of knights. The one on the right is slightly faster than the others, but not as hard hitting, if I remember correctly. There are some pikemen, these are kind of elite pikemen there, and there's a cannon. In the middle there are some less elite pikemen. There are 3 little units of muskets. There is another unit of knights, and over on this flank there are some light missile cavalry, some more muskets, and another cannon. So quite a lot of guns to deal with here. Turn 1 for me. So the sorcerer hops into the woods, because anyone shooting at him is going to have a nightmare now, because he's stealthy, he's in cover, and he's an individual. So yeah, his blizzard puts a bit of damage onto those missile cavalry there. Everything else is moving up. The Master Sergeant is behind that hedge to give him a bit of cover as well. And what does he accomplish along with the archers? Well, they put some damage onto the regular pikeman regiment. And over on this flank, everyone just move up behind the spearling regiment. And those 3 units of knights are not looking forward to this, I imagine. They are quite severely outmatched by my units of knights, although with decent positioning, because I've only got 1 unit screening them, he could force possibly a situation that's not that favourable to me if he manoeuvres them round a bit. Turn 1 for the Kingdoms of Men, so moving up and unleashing all those bullets that they have. So I think those pikemen became wavered last turn, but they weren't planning on moving up anyway. So the knights haven't done much movement at all. The cannons, though, start firing off, and some damage is done to this unit here of spearlings. I think this was from muskets. And the archers as well. And my volley gun actually becomes wavered as a result of a direct hit from my cannon, which isn't nice. Turn 2 for me. So the Duke has moved up to the edge of the woods so that he can fire out of it with his breath attack and the blizzard from the sorcerer as well. And, well, something's dead, and it's the missile cavalry that were there. Those are the damage dice that were on them, so they're dead as a result of all that. And my other shooting units, what do they get accomplished? They waver one of the regiments, or a troop of muskets, shall I say. And over here, you can see there's a valuable 2-point objective there, so if I can discourage the enemy from coming forwards, then that will be nice. My volley gun is actually moving up behind the knights, because there's no one to shoot at the moment, because the enemy are backing away, so I'm just moving it up and hoping to get it into a decent position to fire later on in the game. And should the enemy either get lucky or outmaneuver me and punch through my block of ultra-killy cavalry, then that volley gun will be waiting there to unleash hot lead in their general direction. So there's how it's looking. That big field in the middle is really hampering my progress because I can't move my spearling horde forward very fast at all. Russell is watching as well in the chat there. So the Iron Beast is getting stuck a bit behind them, which maybe, because the Iron Beast isn't going to get cover from that unit in front of him anyway, maybe the Iron Beast could have just been on the front lines here, because there's no one over on this side who wants to charge him, so he could have just been in the middle, just steaming forwards. But of course, it depends on the deployment order, and my opponent didn't deploy all the knights right at the start. So turn 2 for the Kingdoms of Men. So they've turned round to face the threat I'm presenting with the characters over on this right hand side. The cannon hits the Iron Beast and does some damage. The other cannon finishes off my volley gun, so that cannon's hit twice so far, which is nice. And not much else happens, so turn 3 for me. The Duke charges into the cannon, eats it for breakfast. My shooting battery, now down 1 volley gun, what does it do? Puts a bit more damage onto those muskets. And this standoff continues. I'm pushing forwards all the time though, so I think he will actually have to engage, and I've made sure that there isn't enough space for his knights to fit through, so that he can't charge the front of the honour guard with the unit on the left, and he can't fit through to charge the honour guard with the unit on the right either, because I've positioned them so that they're in the front arc, and there's no way for him to make contact with the front arc because they are not able to fit through the gap at the front, and if they come through the side they just wouldn't be able to make contact because they don't have enough pivots or space to land, space to be picked up and placed over there, basically. I may have given him the charge range on the Soul Reavers from those knights there because I'm not as concerned about that. I want to get fighting now over here, and I'm currently on the objective as well, so he has to come out a bit. In the middle, not too concerned about anything. My archers are in cover, so they're just going to be able to shoot for the whole game, and then in the last couple of turns I'm going to start moving them forwards towards that 3-point objective in the middle there. Being a horde is going to give me the edge there, hopefully. Turn 3 for my opponent. So, one of the units of knights do charge into the Spearling regiment that's shielding my knights, which is fine with me. And over here, some of these units are actually, I think that's the, is that the dead cannon there? Still on the table? Yeah, I think these units are turned around to face my duke. And this cannon, which is still alive, and the muskets, they get the Iron Beast up to 10 damage, so he's actually taking quite a beating. The paint job on that looks very nice from this angle. Turn 4. So, he didn't kill that Spearling regiment, by the way, with his knights. My duke decides to charge into that hero on horseback there, because that was a good place to land and actually be able to do some fighting, and it's going to force the enemy to turn around even more units in the next turn, because no one can actually charge him now apart from that hero on horse. So my Spearlings regiment and the Soul Reavers double charged the unit of knights that broke rank and came out first, and then the Soul Reavers fell back D3 because that's going to prevent them from being double charged by the 2 units of knights. So if I had them perfectly level, there would have been space for him to charge both of them into the Soul Reavers, which potentially could kill them. So I'd rather, if he's going to charge them, it's only going to be with 1 unit, which is most likely not going to be enough to worry them. The Honour Guard still staying back. There's no need to throw everything in there and leave them open to the charge, because the Honour Guard can't absorb that much of a hit. In the middle, the Iron Beast and the Spearling Horde are just slowly working their way up there. And my shooting battery with the Master Sergeant and the archers, they kill off one of the troops of musketeers there. And turn 4 for my... wait a minute. Is this turn 4? Yeah, I think it is. So turn 4 for the Kingdoms of Men. So both units of knights getting stuck in now. 1 straight into the Soul Reavers, which I'm not worried about. 1 into the Spearlings, which again I'm not that worried about. With the Ensnare and the Phalanx, that's really the units they want to be fighting. They want to fight knights that rely on Thunderous Charge. And what do these muskets do? They've wavered the Iron Beast, so he's going to have to soak up damage for another turn, which is good. Draws fire away from the enemy. That other waver token there is the 3-point objective in the middle, by the way. So not much damage done here to either of my units, and this battle is going to go very badly for my opponent. So everyone's turned around to face the Duke, and he does take a bit of damage in combats from that hero, so he's not going to be able to fly off. Turn 5 for the League of Rhordia. So the Spearling Horde are still working their way up there. They haven't fought anyone yet, but they're getting right into enemy faces now. Over on this side, the Soul Reavers countercharge those knights, and the Spearlings also countercharge. I was going to charge the Soul Reavers in the front and the Spearlings into the flank of the other unit, but that didn't leave me enough space for the Honour Guard to get through. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm not in any actual rush to end this fight because I'm going to win it eventually, so I'll just countercharge the Spearlings into that unit there and keep my knights safer, basically. Keep it going a bit longer. So my archers are moving up now. As you can see, they're closer to the edge of the terrain because I want to use them to claim the middle objective at the end. turn 5 for the Kingdoms of Men. So muskets, they kill the Iron Beast finally. These knights do actually kill my Spearling regiment, finish them off. I haven't got any inspiring over here. And not much damage done to the Soul Reavers, so now I have the opportunity to charge both of them at the same time. That unit of knights is heavily damaged already, so they're going to be killed by the Soul Reavers, and the other unit should be smushed to death by one charge from the Honour Guard. And you can actually see my volley gun there, which is almost in a position to do something now. So these guys kill off the Duke, which is okay by me because I've tied up his entire flank for most of the game. Turn 6 for the League of Rhordia. So the archers move up onto that central objective there, so they're going to claim that for 3 victory points. The Spearlings are just chilling, there's not much for them to do, everyone's running away from them. And over here I do mush those 2 units of knights, the Soul Reavers finish one off, and the Honour Guard kill the other, and they're both just sitting there, sitting pretty next to that objective. The Sorcerer is still alive and is just trying to blizzard people to death. And turn 6 for the Kingdoms of Men. So, there's those pikemen, and I'm not sure whether they actually attack anybody. These musket guys in the forest charge out into the flank of the Spearlings, which isn't much of a concern. And we do get a turn 7. So, the unit of pikemen get annihilated with a double frontal charge from my 2 units of knights, who then fall back onto the objective a little bit. The Spearlings countercharge those guys there, those musket troops, but I think I might have double wand them because they are not dead. And the archers shoot the unit of knights that came to sit in front of them on that objective, and the Master Sergeant would have joined in with that shooting, so those knights are dead. Wow, 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 splat. And that's going to be the end of the game, so very decisive victory for the League of Rhordia. Killed most of the enemy units, only a few things left, and plenty of points racked up there, so that's got things nicely back on track. And heading into the final game of the tournament. So, the scenario here was kill, which you very rarely see at tournaments. And I can kind of understand at the end of a 2-day event with lots of different game systems, everyone being very fatigued, and to stop everything running behind, maybe putting kill on as the last scenario speeds things up a bit. And it's a nice, easy, simple one, just kill as much as you can. Now, I don't usually just set up to try and do as much killing as possible, so that makes the deployment interesting, and I'm against the Herd, who have more speed than me, but they don't have any flyers though, so the fastest thing on the battlefield will be my Duke, I think. So, on the left flank, I've got my horde of Spearlings who are there because there are 2 units of Stampede opposite, and I've got my Honour Guard behind. There's also, I've put a volley gun, you can't see it, but it's behind that Games Workshop bag on the left next to the building. So I've put 1 volley gun right out on each flank because there's not really a good place to put them in the middle that has line of sight with no cover, so I just put them to threaten the flanks and to deal with any annoying enemy chaff that came in that way. And in the middle I've got my archer horde, because if you look at the enemy centre you can see that it's not the fastest units or the most combat heavy units. We'll get to that when we get to the enemy lines though. Iron Beast down there to protect the archers. Over on this side I've got my Soul Reavers protected by the 2 regiments of Spearlings. My Duke is there, and there's the other volley gun on the other flank. So a Beast Pack, which is opposite my volley gun, which is fine by me. Then there are lots of Lycans. There's a Lycan regiment, a Lycan horde, and a Lycan alpha, which is why I've got 2 regiments of Spearlings there to absorb multiple charges so that my Soul Reavers don't get overwhelmed. Over here, the 2 units of Stampede, that's always terrifying, and actually in the centre there you can see that there's some, what are they called, some Centaur Hunters, something along those lines. They have bows, and there's a Centaur champion of some description, and there is also a big beastie, whose name I can't remember. and there's another beast pack over on the left, and there's a hero with the Diadem of Dragonkind. Both the Stampedes have upgrades. I think one is elite and one has +1 to hit, so they will hit incredibly hard, so I need my Spearling Horde to absorb that, because they'll lose on all their Thunderous Charge, and they only have Crushing 1, I think. I believe they're Crushing 1, Thunderous 3, and they aren't concerned by any obstacles. Every other unit in the army worries about walls and hedges, but the Stampede do not. So I need something with Phalanx and Ensnare to hopefully survive the first charge from them. So my opponent initially moves everything up. You can see where lots of dice have been placed. Those are the threat ranges of all my units, I believe, which is allowing the herd units to remain safe from charges. You can see that the Beast Pack aren't concerned with such trivial matters though. They've gone right up there, ready to charge that volley gun if they get the chance. In the middle, the giant beastie is moving up, and not much else happens. So turn 1 for Rhordia, and I swiftly gun down the Beast Pack with the volley gun and the Duke's Diadem of Dragonkind. In the middle, I'm worried about all these lichens, so I'm positioning the regiment of Spearlings that's being sent out there to deal with them behind a hedge. So if they charge in, they will be hindered and ensnared, which means they're unlikely to kill them in one go, and I can then send the Soul Reavers in to crush whichever unit tries that. In the middle, just rearranging things a little bit, and some shooting onto the big guy. I do waver this unit of Beast Pack here with 3 damage from the volley gun, which is perfect because that's the only defense I had against them, was the volley gun, so wavering them was fortunate there. And look at that, it's a human hand. Let's see. Juan is in the chat, hello, and says, what a shame we didn't cross paths in the tournament. Would have loved to be featured in the battle report. Well, maybe next time. I know it's everyone's dream to appear on this channel as perhaps a hand or a tape measure, or at the very least just their army. So you can see that those units of Stampede are going to be going through the woods shortly because the trees are about to be moved. Turn 2. And look at this. So the Stampede do go into the horde of Spearlings, which is going to be pretty tight regarding whether they die or not. With those artifacts on there, I'm leaning more towards the unit is about to get smushed. If it was just one Stampede, I think they would survive with the Ensnare and the Phalanx, but with 2 and the upgrades on them, it's very dicey. They'll probably die. Over here you can see this big beastie is approaching the archers threateningly. And the Diadem of Dragonkind wavers the volley gun there. The archers take a bit of damage from the centaurs. And the horde of Spearlings are toast, so the Honour Guard, what they're going to have to do now, the only thing I could come up with here that would save them from death, because the Honour Guard, I believe, will die from 1 charge from a Stampede, because they're only defense 5. There's no way of hindering these Stampedes without special rules. So the Honour Guard, as soon as they take a hit from one of those units, they will die, and they're not here, but they're actually supposed to be perfectly level, those 2 units. So what I want to do is charge into the unit on the right, kill them, and then overrun far enough so that the other unit can no longer see the Honour Guard. That is what I think is the best chance of survival. It's a tough one though, because if I fail that 50-50 overrun, and that's after going through the possibility of killing the unit, then I would then get flank charged, which is even more guaranteed death. But I think frontal assault from the Stampede would guarantee death anyway for the Honour Guard, so I'm not at all concerned about that. And one way that you can prevent this happening, of course, is to stagger your units. If the unit on the right, for instance, had moved forwards d6 after the combat, then that option no longer would have been viable, because there isn't enough space for the Honour Guard to fit into the unit on the left, I think, because that piece of terrain just overhangs far enough. Turn 2 for me, so look at that, it actually works as well. So charged in, do a ton of damage, and then overrun exactly 4 inches, which is the precise amount required to get out of the arc of the other Stampede. So that pays off, and the Honour Guard are safe for now. Stampede dead. So my Duke flies up to this hedge where the lichens are chilling, because the Duke, with defence 5, if he can hinder them with this hedge, then he's confident he could survive whatever they throw at him here. And he's out of charge arc for the big unit as well. Is it a big unit or is it a alpha? An alpha there, I can't tell. So the volley gun wavers the big unit. Okay, so I think it was the large unit of Lycans, but they're wavered now as well. So that's good from the volley gun. In the middle there, you can see all the trees are named Ian, which is good to know. And that big beastie is being wind blasted backwards by the sorcerer. Yes, I've remembered that I actually have wind blast in this game, so trying to push it away a bit. Now, the Honour Guard overrunning is going to actually leave the archers with the possibility of being flank charged by the Stampede, but I don't really care about that at all. The Honour Guard are much more valuable, especially in the kill scenario. And that is what happens here. So Stampede into the flank of the archers, they're going to get eaten alive, and the big beastie charges into the Iron Beast, so that's going to be a fun fight. And the centaurs charge into the front of the archers just to make sure, which I feel was a bit of a pointless move, because I think the archers were definitely going to die anyway, and the centaurs have got themselves in harm's way now. And you can see here the double hindered charge from the Lycan Alpha and the Lycan Regiment into the Duke, which I'm hoping isn't going to be enough because they'll be hindered by that hedge. And a Diadem of Dragonkind does a point of damage to the Honour Guard. And also the Beast Pack over on the left are now eating the volley gun at this point, I think. But there's no picture. So the Archer Horde, of course, gets killed, but the way they're all positioned now, you'll see shortly why this is bad. So the Duke becomes wavered, which is okay. You'll see why, because I've got the Soul Reavers over here. Turn 3. So the Iron Beast, you'll notice he's not fighting back against that big monster. That's because he could just, to get the template and the laser out to make sure he could just see the flank of the centaurs. So he charged into the flank and smushed them to death. And over here, the Spearling Regiment went into the front of the Lycan Regiment, and then the Soul Reavers went into the flank. It was hindered though, but it was still enough to annihilate them. The volley gun then wavers the Lycan Horde again, which is great. And the Honour Guard have turned round to face that Stampede, so providing a threat to them. Turn 4 for the Herd. So the Lycan Alpha elects to charge into the volley gun, and is just going to eat that easily. The Iron Beast did its job, it killed a unit, and now it's going to get smushed by a Stampede in the flank and a big monster, which I'm quite pleased about. I'm quite pleased about the positioning at the end of this combat anyway, and you'll see why in a moment. So the Diadem doesn't do anything there. They're about to eat the Iron Beast. This Beast Pack is coming along in the left there to help, and the Centaur Hero there is attacking my Sorcerer. So the Iron Beast is dead. The Honour Guard, it looks like they take 1 damage actually there. And that is how the big beastie is positioning himself to look towards my terrifying Soul Reavers there. And the Lycan Alpha does of course kill the volley gun. So, let's see. The way that this unit of Stampede are positioned, they have not turned to face the Honour Guard, so they're going to get flank charged by the Honour Guard, and that is instant death. I don't think there's one unit in the Kings of War universe that will stand up to a flank charge from Honour Guard. I can't think of one. So that's going to be death on a stick. And hold on, gone too far now. There we go. So turn 4. Stampede in the flank, dead. Big Beastie, double charged by the Regiment of Spearlings and the Soul Reavers, dead. Lycan Horde, charged by the Duke in the flank, dead. There's the Lycan Alpha, who just gets shot with a few arrows from the Master Sergeant. Alive! Well, that doesn't sound quite as good. Turn 5 for the Herd. So, the Honour Guard comically get wavered by a Beast Pack, which is fun. But the Beast Pack are in a position to get smushed shortly anyway. this centaur does manage to kill my sorcerer, and the Lycan Alpha not able to do much to the Spearling Regiment. Turn 5 for the Rhordians. So Spearlings, Master Sergeant and Duke all converge on the Lycan Alpha, and they do 9 damage, which you can see from these very blurry dice. Don't kill him though. Soul Reavers bail out the Honour Guard and kill the Beast Pack that was annoying them. And there's how it looks. So there's not many herd models left. Turn 6, and what happens in turn 6? The Lycan Alpha gets finished off and annihilated. The Centaur Chief, I think it is, survives being charged by the Honour Guard, and I think it's a counter charge in fact, and the other hero who had the diadem gets butchered in close combat by the Soul Reavers. So that is actually the final picture. So the Centaur Chief is the only surviving model for the herd, so it's another very large win for the League of Rhordia, and it's safe to say that my 2,000 point list did a lot better than the 1,500 point list, and I ended up finishing a respectable 16th out of 34 players, so just above halfway, which, considering I barely killed anything and got totally whooped in my first 2 games, I think is a pretty damn good result. Managed to claw it back with those 2 massive victories at the end there. So, looking at the lists, the 1,500 point list will never see the light of day again. The Halfling Knights will probably never be used again, and it just wasn't very hitty. In the bigger list, when I brought in the Soul Reavers, you really need those 2 really powerful units, I think, to be a threat to the enemy. The Iron Beast does a really good job as well, and there weren't too many other changes. The Sorcerer with Blizzard was quite underwhelming. I'd heard people talking about how amazing it was, so I thought I'd give it a try. I felt he didn't really earn his points. He possibly could have done if I had remembered that he's actually quite versatile and remembered to use his Wind Blast at certain times. That would have been helpful as well. So I can definitely see a use for him in the future. Whether I would take Blizzard again, I don't know. There may be other new spells that I want to try out. Anything else? Putting a ranged attack on the Duke. It was a bit hit and miss. I think I'm probably going to try him out. If I give him another ranged attack, I'll make it longer range, because the 12 inches, he's not always close enough to do that. So maybe putting something on him like the boomstick, maybe. So he's got a bit of lightning bolt, so whenever he lands somewhere, he should be able to hit something with that. And because he's height 4, typically, even if he's shooting over various enemy units, there's less chance of there being cover because he's so tall. So a bit of a mobile lightning bolt platform until he charges into combat, because really just looking at people is his main task, being a threat and making the enemy turn round. Let's see, and also just being 20 inches away from the enemy so that they're scared to come closer is another good use for him. So being able to shoot at them while sitting as a deterrent is good. Master Sergeant, everyone loves a Master Sergeant. And I don't think there's too much more to be said about my lists. One was terrible, one was very good, I felt. I'm going to make some changes to the next tournament though, because the next one I'm signed up for is only 1995 points. So I'm going to have to tweak a little bit. I don't think I actually take 3 of the same thing in this list anyway. I only had 2 volley guns in this 2,000 point list, so I wouldn't have to make too many changes unless I want to. I'm pondering trying out some games without archers to see how it goes, because they're not as valuable since they don't unlock anything anymore, and justifying keeping a horde of archers that don't provide an unlock while also having a very expensive unit of allies that don't unlock anything is possibly too much. We'll see though. Anyone who wants to get any comments in before this goes off the air, then you better get them in now, because we're going to be wrapping this one up very shortly. So the tournament in general, let's see, there were 34 players, and I think there were more than that signed up. Some didn't turn up, including my initial first round opponent who didn't turn up, which meant I had to play the Wall of Defence 6 Death. I think about a third of the tournament field actually came over from Spain or other countries, so that was interesting because you obviously see a lot of different lists and styles of play that you don't normally come across. Even different regions in the same country can have different metas, as it were, so when a large group of people come in from another country, that's going to mix things up for everyone big time. I my first 2 games were against Spanish players. The games I lost against the lovely Defence 6 Golem walls. And let's see, at the event in general, there was also the Dead Zone and the Dreadball event. I played one other Spanish player, and that was in Dreadball. In the Dead Zone, I played a Swedish player twice. So, we've got some comments here. Brendan says, thanks for the report. Yes, I'm sure everyone found it extremely educational. There were certain mistakes in there that I will aim not to repeat, and anyone watching this will probably learn not to do in the first place. And anything else I want to say before we wrap this one up? Well, let's turn the camera off for a minute, since that's tradition, as the video is about to end. So, any last minute comments, get them in quick. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, the various social media shenanigans going on down there, Twitter, my Facebook group, and so on, if you're not already joined up to that to see the latest goings on. And then don't forget to obviously send me all your life savings via the various donation buttons down there. That's how people operate on YouTube nowadays. Although I haven't resorted to having any kind of scrolling donation references at the bottom of the screen. None of that, like, last person to donate £2 was Bill. Nothing like that yet. We'll see if anything like that ever creeps onto my channel. Probably not, because it sounds like a lot of hassle to set it up. Anything else? If you want to give me any thoughts on what you would like to see from the League of Rhordia next, then let me know. If you've got any tips on the list, if you've taken any of my tactical tips on board as well and taken it into your own games, not necessarily Rhordia specific, but anything you've picked up from my videos and you found helpful, feel free to drop that in the comments as well, so I can be sure that I'm educating the masses. And with that, I think it's time to wrap this one up. All that remains to be said is, let's check what time it is. Good afternoon out there, whatever you are.